Have you ever wondered what would happen if Gaza City was invaded? Imagine a scenario purely hypothetical, where a military buildup begins to take shape on the borders of the Gaza Strip. Israeli forces in this theoretical situation start to amass, their sights set on Gaza City. Remember, this is a conjecture, a mere possibility, and does not represent any actual events or plans. In this imagined scenario, an invasion of Gaza City would not be a simple operation. It would necessitate the Israeli forces carrying out intensive military operations, requiring meticulous planning and execution. The Israeli forces would have to marshal their reserves to achieve military dominance and break the city's resistance. The air would be thick with tension, the uncertainty of impending conflict hanging heavy over the city. Following this, the Israeli forces would intensify their air and artillery bombardments targeting strategic locations within Gaza City. Vital infrastructures such as hospitals, schools, and public utilities may find themselves in the crosshairs. The city would reverberate with the sounds of explosions, the aftermath of which could result in the destruction of many of these essential facilities. The Israeli forces would then launch their ground invasion of Gaza City. This would be no easy feat, as they would face fierce resistance from Palestinian forces, including groups like Hamas and other armed factions. The city would bear the brunt of the invasion, with widespread destruction and chaos ensuing as Israeli forces gain control over parts of the city. Despite their technological and military superiority, the full and effective occupation of Gaza City would pose a significant challenge for the Israeli forces. It would undoubtedly disrupt the daily lives of civilians in the area, posing a threat to their safety and well-being. Such an invasion would undoubtedly have wide-ranging implications for the region and the world. It would lead to an escalation of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and increased tensions in the Eastern Mediterranean. This potential invasion of Gaza City by Israeli forces paints a grim picture of a humanitarian catastrophe, spreading fear and panic among the city's inhabitants. The city would be subjected to intense bombardments, armed clashes, and significant destruction of vital properties. The daily lives of civilians would be severely impacted, as residents seek refuge in shelters and hideouts for protection and survival. In conclusion, it's important to reiterate that this scenario is purely theoretical and should not be taken as a prediction of actual events. It serves only as a reminder of the importance of maintaining peace in the region and the necessity of working towards a peaceful resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Imagine the initial stages of this hypothetical invasion. The Israeli forces would likely ramp up their air and artillery bombardment, focusing on strategic targets in Gaza. Vital infrastructure would be in the crosshairs: hospitals, schools, power plants, water treatment facilities, the very lifeblood of a city and its inhabitants. The destruction of these facilities would have a cascading effect, disrupting everyday life and potentially causing significant civilian casualties. With each bomb dropped, each round fired, the city would shudder and the people would scramble for safety. Homes would be abandoned, neighborhoods evacuated. The air would be thick with fear and uncertainty, as the people of Gaza would be forced to face the harsh reality of displacement. This initial assault, as devastating as it would be just the beginning of a long and brutal conflict. The full scale of the destruction and the human cost would only become apparent as the conflict unfolds. Now picture the ground invasion of Gaza City. This is not a straightforward task. Israeli forces would face stiff resistance from Palestinian groups, notably Hamas, among others. The city would be a battleground, with the sights and sounds of conflict echoing through the streets. Chaos would reign, with the city's infrastructure taking a severe hit. Vital establishments like hospitals, schools, and utilities could be destroyed, making life even more challenging for the civilians caught in the crosshairs. The city would bear the scars of this conflict, with widespread destruction visible at every turn. The task of subduing the city would be arduous, even with the technological and military prowess of the Israeli forces. The urban landscape of Gaza, its dense population, and the determination of its people to resist all make for a formidable challenge. Despite technological and military superiority, a full and effective occupation of Gaza City would be a formidable challenge. Now let's consider the potential aftermath of this hypothetical invasion. Imagine a city once teeming with life and vitality, reduced to rubble and chaos. The human toll would be immeasurable, lives lost, families torn apart, and a generation witnessing the horrors of war firsthand. The psychological scars would run deep and would take generations to heal, if ever. Politically, the region would be thrown into turmoil. The balance of power in the eastern Mediterranean would shift, causing ripples of tension that could escalate into waves of conflict. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict would reach new heights of bitterness and hostility, with the potential for spillover effects into neighboring countries. Economically, the cost would be staggering. Infrastructure destroyed, businesses shut down, and the local economy brought to its knees. The already struggling Gaza economy would be dealt a blow from which it might never recover. But the impact would not stop at Gaza's borders. The invasion would likely lead to an increased tension in the eastern Mediterranean. The ripple effects would be felt far and wide, potentially leading to a broader escalation of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The humanitarian crisis that would follow such an invasion is hard to fathom. With infrastructure devastated, basic services like electricity, water, health and education would be disrupted. The city would be cut off from the outside world, its people isolated and left to fend for themselves. Humanitarian aid, which the city heavily relies on, would be severely impacted. The isolation of Gaza from the outside world would be another heartbreaking consequence. The city, already heavily reliant on humanitarian aid and external economy, would be hit hard both socially and economically. Services like electricity, water, health and education would be disrupted, signaling a humanitarian catastrophe. The aftermath of such an invasion would be devastating on multiple levels. The cost in human, political and economic terms would be immense. But if history has taught us anything, it's that the human spirit is resilient. And in the face of adversity, people find a way to rebuild, to heal, and to hope for a better future. Finally, what would the international response be to such a scenario? The hypothetical invasion of Gaza would demand swift and decisive action from the global community. Nations around the world would be called upon to intervene, to put an end to such aggressive actions and halt the escalating violence. International and human rights organizations would play a pivotal role. They would need to step up their efforts to protect human rights, uphold international law, and ensure that any transgressions are thoroughly investigated and the perpetrators held accountable. Meanwhile, the dire situation would underscore the importance of negotiation and dialogue. All parties involved must be willing to come to the table, to engage in meaningful discussions with the aim of achieving lasting peace and stability in the region. It is our hope that this scenario remains purely theoretical and that peace, stability and justice prevail in the Middle East.